I'm seeing right now a shift and a change, people adopting, freeing up this cognitive load. You can take a breath, you can take a moment, you can go home when you want to go home.
The Shift, Agentic Edition, connects the people building AI tools with those creating agents so we can all level up together. Today, we're taking a beat with the Microsoft Azure team, Ruhi, Nate, and Rick, about an open question we heard from you. Should my IT team hire agents?
So reactive management, something I really don't love, but that's what we have been doing for last so many decades, at least the 2 decades I've spent in the space of operations management. We rely on these signals. We rely on these automated scripts that tell us something's going wrong, some thresholds going off, some latencies going off peak. And this is where it's all reactive because it's all post, right? You get a signal and then, yes, it'll be 2 a.m. somehow, then I'll be woken up. And that's when you need to then go run some scripts, call in other experts. We will eventually figure out, oh, this is what happened.
So what's your ideal state of where we should be then? If it's not reactive management, what would be the inverse of that? The most optimistic place that we could be?
A lot of times at work, we say this as well, right? We want to shift left. What if you really knew that something was going to happen and measures were taken before that impact truly happened? But that's not an easy problem. If it was, it would have been solved, right? This is where you need a lot of the data connected, the insights connected, the real telemetry, the live insights, all connecting this. And when you can do that through the Agentic Ops platform that we're really, truly all excited about to talk about as well. That's really the world I would love to be, doing the work I love doing, which is working on architecture, scale, new services.
So it's an augmentation and a mind shift that we're trying to do
100%.
at this point in time. We're moving to more of a proactive approach to doing things. I'm curious, Nate, do you have any examples from customers you've been talking with that are also considering moving or already have kind of moved to this kind of state? And what do they say?
From everyone I talk to, the biggest thing is the cultural idea, right? You know, you've got teams who are so accustomed to when a bug or an error comes on, it's like, okay, let's see who we need to reach out to. Let's get these 30 people on a call and just kind of hash it out. I think the thing is, it's just really hard because you have so many different priorities and workloads that looking at the thing that's not broken is pretty challenging to assess. But this is where I feel like all of the new agents and AI capabilities that are coming on can really help you. And so that's where I think building a culture of, hey, let's try to fix things before they're broken. How can we set up our system so it's as resilient as possible so we don't have to get the 2 a.m. wake up call and wake up 20 other people and start looking through like the milliseconds of traces and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the blockers that I've been seeing moving to this more proactive model, the workloads that we're dealing with these days are so complex and across both on-premises world, both inside the hyperscale cloud like Microsoft Azure and all these different tools, stuff like that. They're extremely complex. And these people that are involved in these calls are these people that have to troubleshoot and work in these different areas and monitor and optimize. They only have their own areas of domain expertise. And they don't have that deep enough experience or the context of what they're trying to do in an area where they don't have that experience. Like, I'm not a storage guy, but how am I going to be able to troubleshoot this if it happens to somehow not just be related to CPU cycles and the application layer? It's actually with the storage layer that there might be a problem. I'm not going to know that. But with Azure Copilot, it fills in for you and gives you, because it has that deep understanding of all the different resources that you have access to, it fills in these gaps. And instead of just being what my friends call T-shaped, where you got a good understanding across the board, but you're deep in a couple of areas, you now become more broadly accessible to all the different pieces of that complex architecture.
If I may add to what you were saying, the domain expertise is a great point, but the real value of the Agentic Cloud, or at least the way I see it, is it's connecting all those domains together, connecting the insights across, right? These agents can pass the context, the environment information. But also an interesting thing is, how do I build trust? It's difficult, right? Ultimately, I will be accountable. I am responsible for nothing going wrong. And my own teams, we've heard from customers too. So how do you make this trustable? The way I look at Agentic Copilot and how Azure Copilot is really, and something I would love for all of our audiences listening to know as well, the trust comes from this not being a black box. The trust comes in the IT team, us, the engineers being always in control of what is going to be executed, right? So you have full transparency in terms of the chain of thinking, the agents, the output, all of these are available for you to review.
And you can see every single place it went to, it searched
Exactly.
through. You can
Exactly.
click through it,
Yes.
you can export it if you need to or something. You get the full line of thinking that
it's
you would
all
do,
it's
but it's all
all
right there.
Yeah.
And it can check in so many places that you might not even think to.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I love the fact you can review that. It's right there inside the results of what you're seeing. And then the fact that you're able to have a history of all the things you've asked it to do in the past, and you can go back and take a look at those in case they happen to be referred back to.
Yeah, and then I get to really own and set the intent. I get to set, it's more outcome driven.
Yeah.
I set the reliability goals, I set the compliance goals, and the agents and the Azure Copilot can actually operate alongside with me. So I'm literally cooperating this environment with Copilot and the agents, and it's throughout the life cycle, which is where it brings the full value.
So you have this team where you can bring all of your domain knowledge and expertise that you've applied, but you're operating more as a unit, as a single team, where you can be a little bit more generalist, but our tools, the feedback loops that you're always giving help you really expand your skill set and your own knowledge to apply that to all of your workloads.
And the best part is, Nate, it's not static.
Yeah.
Because it's based on real traffic, real patterns, it's constantly evolving. It's looking at new dependencies, and it's really able to do it real time for you. And it's always there, and it's updating as well, right? It's not like, hey, I did this in 6 months, now it's already outdated. So that's really the true advantage of it too.
Yeah. Rick, I'm curious what you're seeing, because Ruhi was kind of talking about being much more outcome driven. You know, for so long, it feels like we've been trying to mold our environment or our processes to, you know, go serve the outcome we want, right? Like, we need to be more resilient. But now when you're more outcome driven, you can say, hey, all of our production workloads need to have, you know, zonal or geo redundancy or something. And the tooling configuration almost happens secondary from that goal. How do you see that playing out, and what are some of the changes you're seeing there?
I find that I'm using Azure Copilot as a way of learning what the options are as I'm trying to get it to do something. So I'll ask it to go in and give me recommendations on, like, I need to go off and move this particular workload from US East to US West, or I want to move it someplace elsewhere inside of our area inside of Azure, something like that. And can you make recommendations for whatever? So the fact that I can have a conversation with it like a colleague and have it make recommendations, again, based on what it knows and the depth of my environment that I have access to be able to go off and make those recommendations. If I also didn't necessarily ask for improvements, it's going to, you know, it's not going to go and give me everything and overload me with recommendations for what needs to go on. I choose the amount of information I want to have come back in that answer. I'm still in control of whether or not I want to do it or not.
Yes,
right?
100%.
And you mentioned the black box aspect of things, but I'd also like to mention just how do you control what it can see, how it can do, and how it's even turned on in the first place?
I actually love this question. And the reason I love this is because Azure Copilot, by default, is built with compliance and governance as the first step. It's not an afterthought. It's not a built on. These agents only have the permissions that you as a user have. So if you cannot write something or you cannot delete a service, the agent doesn't have the permissions to go do that either.
That's a good thing for me.
Yes, that is a good thing. That is a good thing. But also, it is with human in the loop process where Azure Copilot will pause, will wait for your approval for any action it needs to take. So you will always be in control. As the IT operator or as the user, you set the goals. The Copilot and the agents can help you understand, are you meeting those SLOs? What are some of the recommendations? And then you decide if you want the agent to take the action, or you really want to take those scripts and recommendations and do it through your standard CI/CD pipeline, where you have your reviewers, your code process, and all of the standard processes still applicable. So you get the benefits of this agentic platform with full control, governance, and human in the loop.
This is what I love about Azure Copilot is is sitting on the data source. Like that knowledge source it has is all of your traces and logs, but all of your existing Azure environment configurations. And so if you already have an environment where you maybe have a lot of backups or security policies or things set up, it will still abide by that. Obviously, you've got developers exploring all sorts of, new AI models and new tooling, but for someone in IT, what these agents can do is, I think, help you adapt to that change. What do you think about that?
I want to follow on to that along the lines of steps that we're moving towards this, because we were talking, first of all, about reactive and then now becoming more proactive and stuff like that. I think of this from the perspective of an administrator working with various different tools to be able to go off and get things done. It really is this shift that we're doing. And I'd like you to kind of elaborate a bit on that more, because you mentioned the term, but we haven't really talked about it yet, the concept of agentic operations. Does this fit into that definition, and how do we build that out as far as explaining what agentic operations even is?
Right. If you think about the landscape as well, even within my own engineering team here running Azure services, it's getting more and more complex. It's globally distributed. The scale, the infrastructure, the number of services, it's multitude, right? So this is where, with the complexity, the number of different tools, the dashboards, it's becoming beyond human scale, or we are always in that firefighting mode, as we were talking about. To be able to go beyond this firefighting mode, the thing that's really exciting for me is this is the biggest shift. Agentic of cloud operations is the biggest shift we are seeing in cloud operations since virtualization. Because it takes the toil away. It takes the work of stitching these incidents, the dashboards, the tools, those are taken away. I can truly enjoy the work I do because I focus on setting my service goals, understanding the architecture, understanding the reliability postures, and leveraging the expertise of the agents.
Right, and I know that all the different agents and tools, we already talked about how they're grounded in the resources you have access to, the stuff that you can work with. They have the knowledge of how those systems work, because the agents themselves are also grounded in our support documentation.
And the expertise is coming from the engineering team delivering these agents so it can truly perform those actions end to end.
So your teams, when they were building this and this concept for how it works, they partnered with all the different engineering teams across all of Azure to be able to pull these together to make this work?
So that's we do work across many Azure teams.
Right.
There are certain teams which are across all services. So for example, learn documentation, when we do it, we cover all of Azure services, but then we go deep into specific services like Kubernetes. Kubernetes team is something we partner very closely with, or we partner very closely with the virtual machines team. We partner very closely with cost optimization. So we can really do predictive analytics, and it's grounded in all of that rich data that Nate was talking about, which is coming from our real life telemetry, from audit logs, from our, all of the data that it's grounded in. So it's really built by hundreds of teams across the Microsoft organization.
And you have, the existing Azure services that have been there that most people are familiar with, but the agent kind of sits on top of them in some regard and can help pull out the insights or give more contextual information in natural language. And it's able to contextualize all those insights and give them to you.
Yes, and the Azure Copilot actually will also connect a lot of these agents together. So as a user, you don't need to go figure out which agent am I calling, why am I calling this. All of that hard work is done on your behalf by the Azure Copilot orchestra.
So I love that. So it can make recommendations, but it's also smart enough to be able to say, by doing that, your new level for baseline metrics is no longer going to be here. Now you're going to have this level of CPU utilization, this level of storage utilization, or network utilization as well, and it can give you that information.
To me, that's what builds confidence. I'm not working against a black box for a recommendation. I can now review and understand what this recommendation is. And every data source, every resource that these agents are querying, it's actually logging you all of that as evidence and data you can go look in the chat history later on.
Nice.
I was actually meeting with a customer yesterday at our experience center here, and it was really funny to watch this shift happen in real time. They were talking about how they have this big monolithic application that runs on-prem, and it's very memory intensive. And they're trying to figure out, okay, when we started talking, we said, something Azure Copilot can do is it can recommend an application architecture for you. Now they can actually just start from almost cloud native and the solution they want right away. We saw them change their whole adoption strategy and their timeline. They realized that they could be at the end state they wanted to be at and solve a lot of their technical debt issues so much faster than their initial projections.
Some things that honestly would have taken them weeks, if not longer, to build is something they're now trying to build much quicker.
Obviously, we've talked a lot about the security, but maybe you could talk about the storage of where a lot of this data and information lives, right? Because all that Azure Copilot knowledge and conversation history and everything, it can all live in a customer's own storage tenant. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. As I was referring before to, compliance and governance is top priority for us and our customers as well. So with Azure Copilot, you can bring your own storage. So you can either have Microsoft store it in the Microsoft tenant, or you can bring your own storage and we can store it in customers' tenant, customer storage accounts, and you can put whatever policies you want in terms of the number of days you want to keep it for, 30 days, 45 days, whatever works and whatever you need. So that's the bring your own storage capability, where all of the artifacts that these agents are generating can be stored and you can use it for any audits later.
I like how they've got this separated out into a dedicated storage account that could be yours inside of your own location, could be inside of Azure, could be elsewhere, because that also opens up the possibility of collaboratively learning about how other people in your team are using it.
Yeah.
Right? The way that I'm thinking and working with the co-pilots and with the different agents could be shared, and the whole team would benefit. So what I'm seeing from an adoption perspective is you've got internal pockets of champions that are latching on to this capability, and they're becoming much more efficient at what they're doing. They need to champion it internally amongst themselves and their peers in order for this to be able to grow. It's not a top-down thing. Infrastructure people, IT pros, people that work in these different operations teams, we kind of define ourselves by the tools that we use. And when I'm seeing adoption of AI technologies, you have to think of it as simply one more tool inside that tool belt that you're working with, right? What I've been trying to explain to folks when I meet them at customer events or at online discussion forums and stuff like that is that, again, this AI capability is just one more tool in your tool belt. Think of it like the advent of using a pneumatic nailer to be able to build a house versus a traditional hammer and a nail. You still have to have the domain expertise of framing walls and load-bearing walls and jack studs and king studs and door frames and stuff like that. It's an accelerator. It's a multiplier. And that all boils down to more efficiency for that particular IT team.
The way I look at what you're saying, Rick, is it's not about a new tools or new skill set. The core skill sets are still needed. It's not changing any of those.
Right.
It's just a focus. You still have to do the task. The core IT skills don't go away, but I can get 10 things done than one, right?
I feel like ops teams, you were talking about this, are under this like huge amount of pressure where they have to be innovating for the future, right? At the same time, sometimes you are very cost focused, right? What's our spend per server per month? Or we've got all these licensing costs or hardware refreshes we have to do. There's this huge tug of war that they're always playing. What do you think about that, and what have you seen?
Maybe if I just want to take it back to my own engineering team before I even go to the customers and what we're hearing, there's so many things, we call it our backlog, right? There's so many things we know that we want to get to.
The endless
It's just you never get to.
Yeah.
And we are busy doing the same manual tasks, the same repetitive action.
Right.
Is it fun? Exciting? Honestly, no, right? So this is where the thing that excites my own engineering team within Microsoft and even some of the initial customer signals, we take away that manual toil, right? Those tedious tasks are gone. And now what we can really work on is focus on those outcomes that you're talking about, right? Those outcomes are whether it's looking at the reliability posture, well-architected frameworks, things that we never ever get to because we're so busy doing the daily signals. And now all of a sudden I can focus on the other things which I really want to go that will meaningfully change how I truly operate my cloud environment.
Right. So as these teams are starting to adopt and use this new way of working, trying to become more agentic operations focused, they share the cognitive load that has been lifted. It's no guarantee you're going to get through that backlog still, just to be safe.
It gets better. It gets better. But it's actually the funny joke within my own team, my own DevOps team, is like, what do you not like doing? See if you can leverage Copilot to help you get that task done, and it's exciting. All of a sudden, it's very exciting.
This is funny because I'm coming at this from a management and optimization perspective, because that's my background from the on-premises world and the hybrid world. And so the advantages that I see that are coming out of this are not necessarily the same that you're seeing leading a development team, an engineering team that's building things, because each of those teams have their own different levels of success for the stuff that they're working on. I'm seeing right now a shift and a change, people adopting, freeing up this cognitive load, sharing what they're doing with the rest of the teams. And it literally, I can't stress that whole relief. Like, you can relax your shoulders.
Yeah.
You can take a breath. You can take a moment. You can go home when you want to go home. You still have to be on call. Let's be honest here. You still have to be on call. But this way of tackling problems and managing ongoing and monitoring ongoing stuff like that, it really does lighten the load for the everyday things that you do.
Gives you the confidence to do your job better too, because you have true insights. You have all of the data, things you might not have thought of looking at is something that the agent has looked and given you some ideas to go through.
Yeah, it complements my existing areas of knowledge to be able to get the job done. Absolutely.
One of the things I feel like is a common trend that I hear is, yes, we do want to migrate workloads to the cloud and things like that. But really, a lot of the changes, especially for the IT pro, is just instead of going from the old virtualization way of doing things into more, what is the cloud way of doing things, regardless of whether that workload itself lives in the cloud, right? I feel like something that AI and all these new AI agents are helping to do is help you achieve that faster. Because when you have a bunch of maybe workloads that are stuck in the data center, you need the ability to modernize them. And, we've been talking a lot about IT, but there's that big relationship between IT and the software development team.
I think this is where all of these co-pilots and the platforms are merging, honestly, right? And then when you are in Azure Copilot managing those environments, this life cycle is so much more optimized now because I don't have to go figure out all of those infrastructure details. The developers are loving it because we can work on what we like, which is writing code.
So you're saying your developers, if they need more access to compute, they don't have to open a ticket and we got to go buy more hardware or something and it takes 6 months. That whole issue, we solved that, you're saying?
It's still going to be in context of the permissions of what that dev team's going to be able to do.
Yeah, that's right.
They're not going to be pushing the prod on a Friday.
Yeah.
Right? They still have to work with inside of the constraints that are there from the policies perspective.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It just makes it so much faster to be able to diagnose. Once I've hit deploy, something went wrong and I need to go fix the config in my code, I get that immediate feedback and I don't have to go spend a lot of time trying to understand the different service architecture or the API layers and things, right? So that just makes it much more easier and faster. We'll still create the tickets, but in automated fashion so we can track it for the audit reasons.
Right. The tickets aren't going anywhere.
No, they're not going anywhere.
You were talking about an application modernization example and interfacing between those two different teams. I also want to challenge and say, yes, and this one piece, which is around modernization of how I would be managing these workloads. Yeah. So I'm used to working inside of an on-premises world, my on-premises tools, and that sort of stuff. And we haven't even talked about this yet, but all the stuff we're talking about with Azure Copilot, it can also work on your resources that are still on-premises.
Yeah.
Because of things like Azure Arc.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. So with Azure Arc, as you can connect the control plane and you have this single control plane, now Copilot and all the Copilot agents can actually work across. So now you're connecting all of these insights across the environments. But again, with the RBAC, with compliance, none of it is without those permissions.
Yeah, I'm not going to be deploying something on a Friday inside of my Asia Pacific region if I'm only responsible for North America, right?
Yeah.
So,
but if you've got sovereign workloads, if you've got latency bound things, or maybe you're trying to do a data center exit or something, but you're just working your way through your waves of migrating, you can still bring everything from day one immediately into a cloud operating model.
Right.
I think it's so important that there was an old model that was followed and is great, but there's this new cloud operating model, and that exists really for the benefit of these teams.
And I think the beauty of this is it's really working with the cloud principles because it looks at the smallest change you can make, the smallest blast radius, what is a rollback strategy, right? All of those things are considered first before a recommendation comes. So you can be very confident that this is following all the right principles of cloud scale as well.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm particularly passionate around is this collaborative sharing of this information. But one of the things I'm seeing is the advent of people that have been working in the IT industry for a long time, and they've grown up through all these different modes of how to work and do different things. They're using these new AI tools to be able to go and be more efficient and learn these new ways of doing work. We've got to do our job and share that with the new people coming in as well, right? So it's not just us sharing our knowledge of working in the industry for so long and the way that we've done things and now how we're augmented it with AI tooling. But we also have to be there as mentors. We have to be there as people that share this information back with the people that are coming in, the younger people, the people that are in the earlier stage of their career, and to accelerate what they're doing as far as a multiplication of their skills and capabilities as well.
Yeah, I agree. But I would emphasize, Rick, though, that you do want to focus more on system level thinking.
Right.
Thinking more about the permissions, the compliance boundaries. Those are interesting, understanding how the agents work. It's not new skills, but a little bit of a shift on the focus.
Right. The way I approach an awful lot of AI at this point is from an adoption lifecycle. And at the dev space, in the dev worlds, earlier in the cycle for where things are, you've got an environment where they have to play, they have to learn how to build it, they have to learn how to bring it into their apps that they've built internal, and that sort of stuff. For infrastructure people, for IT pros, for a lot of our customers, that's not the mode that they're in. That's a small percentage of Microsoft customers that are in that space, and they're big customers, but that's not a particular large to medium-sized insurance company that's using Azure or something like that. They're buying off the shelf. So their exposure to AI is going to be what we provide them inside of M365, what we provide them inside of Azure Copilot. And when they do get to the point where they've doing a greenfield new project that they're building, or a new customer-facing website, or new internal tools that they're building or modifying from off the shelf, that's when they approach that workload, or they need to approach that workload with that new mindset of how to manage it and how to look after it.
Any change, especially something that feels this big, can be overwhelming. It's true for any change. Even my own engineering team, when we started using AI to write code and GitHub Copilot, the biggest thing and the learning for us is start by trying it. So with Azure Copilot, I would say the same thing. It's turning it on, right? Going in Azure Copilot, going in the portal, getting started with using Azure Copilot. You can scope Azure Copilot to specific users, specific tenants. You can scope it to specific environments. You can scope it to only do read-only actions and not go do write actions. So, but really it's about getting started and taking the level of risk that you are okay with.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Check out the link below to get our white paper on intelligent operations in partnership with Harvard Business Review. See you next time.